Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. I am your host today, Craig Collins filling in. I'm actually back again tomorrow as well, and then I assume Chad's back after an awesome celebration of the new decade. By the way, at some point in the show, I'm also going to talk about when the decade starts. I posted on my social media pages, which you can follow if you want to, although you don't have to, facebook.com/Craig Collins Show. But I posted that the decade was ending, and people didn't seem to agree on that. So I'll talk about that a little later. I do want to kick off the show, though, with more conversations about one Nancy Pelosi and her decision to, I don't know, just hang out with the articles of impeachment, just keep them in her purse. I don't know what she's doing with them. I don't understand a lot of the process and how this can happen. But House Minority Whip Steve Scalise has a little bit more information on that.
Well, it's our duty to turn it over. It's not like some mechanism she can control. The House passed it. They shouldn't have. I mean, you look at what the evidence was, and Speaker Pelosi wanted to talk about the evidence. Every one of their witnesses testified under oath saying there was no crime, saying there was no quid pro quo. Maybe she's trying to carry out her own quid pro quo by acting as if she's got some kind of role in the Senate trial. They had a weak case. I think she knows they had a weak case. There was no evidence and no crime committed. And yet they still wanted to impeach the president to appease their radical base. That's what this was about from the beginning. They've neglected a real agenda for hardworking families, by the way. And so what you're seeing right now is, I think, Pelosi just exposing the fact she has no case and trying to have one more bite at the apple. They're even talking about more impeachments next year. How about they focus on lowering drug prices, securing our border, doing an infrastructure package that they could have done in a bipartisan way. They don't want to do any of that because they've become the party of impeachment. They have this obsession, it seems like, with carrying out this political vendetta that they have against the president instead of working with him to get things done.
I have two reactions to that audio as I heard it. The first one is the party of impeachment concept, because I am fearful, and this is honestly, like, candidly fearful, that what's going to happen now is that every time that the guy on the wrong side of the political aisle, or probably more likely anytime the Democrats don't have someone in office that they like, they just impeach him. That's just going to be a thing we do way more often than we've ever done it before. The fact that two presidents in the last few have been impeached is kind of remarkable in and of itself, if you think about that. But I think this sets a terrible precedent moving forward, and I pray that somehow politicians do not use this as like, okay, this is the new platform. We don't like what you're saying. We don't like what you're doing. We don't care that the economy is incredible. We just want you out. So impeach, find a reason, kick him out. And I'm not, again, trying to, belittle the things that actually did happen. There are some confusing aspects to what the president did as far as his conversations with Ukraine. But that is not necessarily impeachable things, in my opinion. And yet I just see impeachment being this huge thing moving forward. The second, though, is the more important thing he says about our current situation with Nancy Pelosi sitting on these articles of impeachment. I don't understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyone, go ahead. Please call in and correct me if I'm wrong. I thought we had to impeach immediately. I thought speed was utterly important in this situation, that we had to move as quickly as possible to get trials underway, to get things to happen, as at least when the House was deciding whether or not to impeach the president. And then all of a sudden, speed doesn't matter anymore. We're just kind of like, we did enough now. I'm curious, and I've been curious the entire time, if this was all just a political thing for the sake of politics. And again, I'm not trying to demean or reduce what may or may not be things that the president shouldn't have done. I'm being honest. I'm being candid here. At the same time, if you know going in that the Senate is not going to do what you want them to do, if the Senate isn't going to see it the same way, why do we go down this path? Why do we go down a path where I think we're stretching for certain things? We're turning what might be bad maneuvering into, crimes and misdemeanors or whatever they have to be in order to, in the Democrats' understanding of everything, actually impeach a guy and then move forward and impeach other people in the future. But seriously, we change the entire process here, and then we sit on something because how long was that the plan? From step one, was that the idea, the assumption, the initiative that we were just going to accuse the process of being rigged once we get the result we want in the place where we have control? And then once we don't have control anymore, well, we're just not going to let you guys play in our sandbox anymore. We're not going to give you our toys. We're just going to sit here and wait until you tell me it's as fair as possible. I use air quotes when I say that, so that we get more people to be interviewed. We get more people to be subpoenaed and have conversations. I do want to hear from some people. It'd be interesting to hear from those people. But I also think we're just in an insane world right now. It's just an insane world. 2019 is about to end. And the main takeaway for me, for Craig and all this, is that, moving forward, politicians are just going to be more diverse, more separated, and more likely to do crazy things like impeach a guy you don't agree with. Moving on, and this is the other thing that's really interesting to me. Well, we're doing all this kind of pausing and kind of delaying of a process that you had just told me was important to expedite. We also have Joe Biden. Joe Biden sitting around saying that, if he gets subpoenaed, he's not going to go. And then saying, wait a minute, maybe I would go. I'm not really sure. What do you guys think? Joe doesn't know how to react to things on his own. And CNN, of all places, this is Anna Navarro on CNN, thinks that maybe Joe better have his talking points right.
This is going to continue coming up for Biden. There is no, there's absolutely no shot that either in the primary or much less in a general, should he make it, this will not come up. And he needs to have tight, consistent answers that are logical,
good luck,
not defensive, not emotional. This is going to continue coming up. He needs to know how to deal with it because it's not going away.
I'm sorry, I laugh at the idea that Joe needs to be real prepped. We got to make sure he's got all the talking points set up because he does have to address things. There's still confusing aspects in all this, which goes back to the initial conversation and the idea in general. And I've said this before. I think I've said it on the show. I know I've said it other places, but truthfully, if the president of the United States had communicated all his concerns without being specific, and I hope that everyone on the other line, on the other end of that phone call, would know what he's talking about, it is confusing. What happened with Hunter Biden is still a mystery to me. A lot of people say it's obvious that no crimes were committed, that everything's fine, and yet I don't know if we have all of the details. I don't know if we totally comprehend everything that went on in this situation, and for whatever reason, no one cares. And Joe has the balls, in my opinion, to, for at least a little while, say he wouldn't even go. If he were the one to be subpoenaed, if he were the one we want more information from, I'm going to pass. But then at the same time, we have to make sure all these other people are subpoenaed before we hand over these articles because, I don't know, that's the plan from the beginning. This makes no sense. If anyone can call in and explain to me better what the heck happened, I would very much appreciate that. One last thing I want to play, and then I think I have to take a break. Washington Post's executive editor, that is Marty Baron, was doing an interview, and he said something to me that was kind of interesting for all news outlets to follow. It's the concept that Trump voters, human beings, should be respected. How crazy.
Yeah, look, I think we have to be careful. I don't want to be dismissive of people who support the president. Right. I think they're owed our respect, and they certainly have mine. But they feel that the so-called elites in Washington have not paid attention to them, that they don't understand their lives, they don't understand their concerns, that and they're not being heard. And they feel that the president is actually listening to them and addressing their concerns.
Yeah, exactly. Chuck Todd, by the way, is the one doing that interview. And I'm pretty sure the softball question he had handed to Marty was, what do we do about the fact that everyone's a liar in the administration? What do we do? Some ridiculous concept of a question. And it was a nice transition by Marty Baron. Maybe he should run for an office where he says, you know what? We actually need to respect people. And maybe all of our news coverage can't be one-sided. That's an idea. That's a concept to throw out. 2020. The better way to live is for everyone to follow that simplistic concept that, hey, if someone supports the president, enjoys the economy, enjoys the things that are good that have happened, maybe we don't have to totally dismiss that human being. All right, quick break and a lot more coming up on the Chad Benson Show. Filling in for today, I'm Craig Collins. Be with you in a minute.
Chad
Chad Benson Show, the only place so far that the Mueller investigation hasn't deep probed for collusion.
Redacted! Redacted!
Stay tuned.
This is Chad Benson.
Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson on the Chad Benson Show today. Something I found interesting. Apparently Sharon Stone is single. One, I didn't know that. And I know that only because she got banned from a dating app. And that, for whatever reason, that's something I want to talk about today. It's interesting that people like Sharon Stone might struggle to date more than the rest of us, even when it comes to dating apps. She was on Bumble. She had an account there. And I guess it was fairly easy to access if you were in her area, because enough people complained that it was evidently fake. Enough people saw her real dating account and said, no, there's no way the famous Basic Instinct actress could possibly be trying to find her lover, her next, paramour on Bumble. So they reported it, and then she goes to Twitter, and I believe this is earlier today, actually, and demonstrates the fact that she was blocked. She's been iced out. She said, I can't have access to my dating app anymore because they don't believe it's me. And then Twitter does what Twitter does. If anyone uses that social media site, you know that they explode in reaction to pretty much anything. So her fans and then other people that probably barely care, start tweeting to the dating app Bumble and start tweeting this issue and begging to let Sharon Stone back into her dating app. And she finally gets the access back. But it's just surreal to think about this process. We're, 2019 now. We are about to go to a new decade, in my opinion, not in everyone's opinion, in 2020. And famous people can't date online. They can't date online because no one believes it's them. I can't believe no one swiped. Maybe that's the thing. And I don't know how all these dating apps work. I've been a taken man for quite some time now. But I know that some of them, you can only see someone if they've already liked you or if you've swiped to like them. I don't think that everyone's available on all these apps. So maybe the actress was liking a lot of the people that were complaining she couldn't possibly be real, and they all lost their shot at dating her. How upset would that be if that was you? That you're like, no, this can't be her, and now you don't have a chance anymore with Sharon Stone, who's out there in the world just trying to figure things out. I guess this is going to be a celebrity news segment, because I'm going to move on to one more thing I found entertaining that I saw today. Zac Efron is an actor. I don't know if you know who he is, actually. I assume you do. He's a younger guy. He's been in Baywatch and a bunch of other things recently. I think he came from the Disney Channel to first become famous. But anyway, he's shooting a new series called Killing Zac Efron. Yes, someone pitched him the concept, hey man, let's do a dangerous show and let's call it You Might Die. And he said yes to it. He goes out and films in Papua New Guinea, of all places. This is just before Christmas. And he contracts some sort of deadly virus that he was very much at risk of losing his life because of. They had to fly him to Australia. They treated him on the plane or the helicopter, whatever he's on. And then when he finally lands, I guess he's in a stable enough condition that they just have to treat him for a few more days, and he's out of the hospital. But how crazy. In my mind, the two things that I couldn't believe about these stories, one, Sharon Stone needs a dating app to date, and that's hard. And two, any actor in this day and age would accept a project that literally is titled Killing That Person. The actual concept is to put him in as dangerous a situation as possible and then just, see what happens. And I was talking to someone I work with here about why today an actor or an actress might be willing to do something like that, do a show that sounds that crazy. And I honestly blame social media. I imagine that he now thinks he's some sort of, invulnerable human. He would go on his social media. He'd post things about whatever it is Zac Efron does with his life. And every one of his fans would tell him how great he is. He would tweet out about this show and that it's starting up and it's going to be fun. And probably all of his fans say, great idea. I can't wait to watch. I'm so excited to see you maybe die. Would you back out now? Serious question. If this were you, if you were a celebrity person and you were offered a show like this and during the initial taping, you almost die, would you be willing to go back and do more work? I would not. If I were almost killed in this workplace today, if that were a risk of filling in for Chad, I would pass on the opportunity moving forward. I would say thank you very much, but you know what? This is not my time. This is not what I want to do with this. And yet Zac Efron, whatever. we'll be fine. I'm 30-something. I can figure it out. There's no risk here. I just can't imagine it. I'm trying to envision the way the pitch went when whatever executives went up to Zac Efron, famous person, and told him the idea of the show. Did they really have to sell him on it? Or was this the kind of thing that he immediately was like, yeah, no, I'm in on that. That sounds amazing. I'm so curious. I wonder if you even go in and you hide that part of the pitch. You're like, hey, show idea, somewhat dangerous. We're going to put you in crazy places you've never been before with guides that we don't really know much about, and everything's going to be fine. Okay, all right, I like it so far. What are we going to name the show? Well, Zach, I think the name of the show might be Killing Zac Efron. I can't get over it. It's the kind of thing that I don't know. I am truly curious how celebrity people make decisions like this because to me it seems like you might have another project. Say no every once in a while. Look for a little bit more. After a break, we got some news, we got other things coming up. But after that, I want to talk about a couple things. The Michael Moore quote just fascinates me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it, maybe, while you're sitting around listening to the radio, or just wait for me to tell you in a few seconds. But he broke bad. He broke bad against, of all things, he said that white people, and I'm pretty sure Michael Moore is a white guy, are not good people. He went into great detail on a podcast. Oh, and one more quick thing. For anyone, Michael Moore or any person that does a podcast interview, I know it's not live radio, no, it's not television. People hear it. People listen to it. They can share it with their friends. They can get that information out in the world. So if you're shocked today, Mr. Moore, that so many people are talking about your hot quote about how much you don't like certain people, I don't know. Maybe don't do a podcast called Useful Idiot. Maybe that's the kind of thing you also say no to. I need to be everybody's PR person. That's what I need to be. At this time of the year, hire Craig as your PR guy. I'll just say no to everything. All right, we got Chad Benson Show coming up, more of the Chad Benson Show. But first, quick break, a little news. I'll be back with you in a few.
Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show. I'm with you guys for the whole show today, and I'm actually back tomorrow, too. And then Chad will be back, I assume, after the holidays wrap up. I want to start this segment by talking about the tragic events that took place just outside of New York at an Orthodox Jewish community. A person, I think, well-known for having many mental issues, harmed some people. He took a machete to a local Jewish community and attacked people. He stabbed 5 people. He wound up getting arrested within 2 hours. And the biggest reason why any of this took place, according to many people who are familiar with the human being, Grafton Thomas, the 37-year-old out of Greenwood Lake, is that he has a lot of mental issues. Mental issues he's been treated for. Grafton has received episodic treatment before being released. We believe the actions of which he is accused, if committed by him, tragically reflect profound mental illness. That is one of the people covering the story, covering the conversation. And yet, I'm hearing a conversation, I believe I'm seeing it on some of those cable channels that you assume these types of conversations go on, about it being a hate crime. And while certainly it's terrible that a specific community was affected by this, and certainly there are people who commit hate crimes all the time on all different kinds of groups of people and deserve to be tried for those things, we can't just invent hate crimes when they might not be happening. People covering this story go on to say that Grafton has absolutely no ties to any sort of organization that is anti-Semitic, any sort of group that would make this seem to be a hate crime. He has no actions he's done or things he said on social media, all the things that you start to find with anyone that is accused of committing something for a specific reason. He's just someone who has a severe mental illness, which happens to be a majority of the people who commit acts like this of violence, who try to commit mass murder or who succeed in doing things like that. People usually just are not well mentally. It's not necessarily that every single group of people that does this sort of thing is targeting a group for a specific reason. And so it's surreal to me to see people up there on television, on the channels, again, you assume they're on, telling us how much more needs to be done to prevent hate crimes like this one. You can't make up hate crimes. Doesn't that devalue the crime itself? Doesn't that devalue the times in which you're right that someone did have a problem and target people specifically and go after those people, and we need to address those moments? Isn't that more important to not cry wolf for the times that it's real? I ask you that. And again, it's horrific. There's been so many unfortunate, tragic events within this past year, or even honestly, within the last few days. I mean, the shooting in Texas, too, is surreal to think about. And I'll talk about it later on today. But it's just so interesting to me to see something where someone goes to a church and takes 2 lives with a shotgun, and then he gets killed by people, volunteer people who are armed as well. And still the conversation's about gun debate, gun control. That's where the conversation goes. Someone is prevented from taking more life by good guys with guns, a sentence that you hear every so often. We need good guys with guns. And our conversation just goes to this political place. In both of these stories, the narrative should be the narrative. You shouldn't create it and make it something else. I don't win points when I make an observation that doesn't exist. It's just not. I'm sorry. I lost it for a second there. You just can't do it. And actually, maybe that leads me to Michael Moore pretty well. Anyone who's not familiar with the film creator, the director, the whatever you want to call him, the activist, he's a white dude. He's very much a white dude. And he appeared on a podcast that I think was aptly entitled A Useful Idiot. It's called The Useful Idiot. That's the name of the show. And he broke bad when talking about the racial dynamics between black people and white people, and he offered this explanation.
I refuse to say because we elected Obama that suddenly that means everything's okay. White people have changed. White people have not changed. 2/3 of all white guys voted for Trump. That means anytime you see 3 white guys walking at you down the street toward you, 2 of them voted for Trump. You need to move over to the other sidewalk because these are not good people that are walking towards you. You should be afraid of them.
Holy macaroni. I don't even know how to react. I wanted to say a different word if anyone doesn't know, but I won't. I don't want to get fired today. But seriously, his take is not only that the problem is the race that he is, but that 2 of 3 people voted for Trump, and that means that those people are just bad people. They're the kind of people that you can't walk on the same side of the street as. This is delusional. This is a delusional take. And one of the hosts of the podcast jokes with him that 3rd person maybe thought about voting for Trump.
And the 3rd one probably says, I'm thinking about voting for Trump. Right?
Yeah, the 3rd one is you and me.
Yeah. Right.
We're traitors. We're traitors to our race. That's how they see us, too, by the way.
Right.
You know, we were thinking, we've been debating whether or not to go to Trump's rally in Battle Creek.
This makes me mad. I don't know how to react to this other than mad. And it's not who I support politically that's what makes me so mad here. It's the idea that Michael Moore is a traitor to his race, that all white people congregate together and have a conversation like, hey, guys, you know what we got to do? We got to do this and this. And, okay, but don't tell anybody else. It's just for – what is he saying? I can't – okay. I might need to move on. I might need to talk about this more later in the show because I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I should take a break or just keep – I need to move on to a different topic. I do. Because just vilifying people, human beings, is the least productive version of fixing any problem. If there is a problem, if there's any level of racism or anything else that exists in our society, again, this might even go back to the conversations about violence and the way in which we pivot actual situations into fake ones. But if the narrative is hate certain people because they probably hate you, we're in a bad place. I did not expect to talk about, racial issues today on the show, and then Michael Moore does a podcast. I do wonder, and I said this before our last break, I do wonder if he just didn't expect people to hear it. Every so often you see that happen in a podcast. Maybe it's because they feel amateur. It's not like you show up in a radio studio like the one I'm in right now. You usually show up in some guy's living room, or maybe something a little fancier, unless you're one of the like highest end of that platform. And then you just talk to people with a microphone sitting in front of you. And maybe for that reason you get looser. Although I imagine Michael Moore, of all people, would say this in whatever platform he's on. He probably has said stuff like this before on literally any platform he's on. So how is it productive? How is it helpful? How are we going anywhere valuable, even if a person were willing to acknowledge that things are not perfect, which everyone should acknowledge that? That's insane to think that we're in a perfect place. But at the same time, like, well, the problem is 2 or 3 white dudes, they supported Trump, and that third guy's thinking about it. Or no, actually, according to Michael Moore, the third guy's a traitor. Okay, moving on, and probably not to a place that's any lighter for me. Although I don't have kids, so I don't know why this story interests me. It's about parenting, and I just want to talk about it for a second to get a palate cleanser, to get away from Michael as much as I can. 2,000 parents were surveyed recently talking about the changes they've seen in their parenting style. And apparently, trends today are just following the desires of children now more than ever. If a kid, for instance, and this 93% of parents who responded to this study said that they've changed a behavior because of a child. This is anything from trying to live green and use less plastic, or maybe, follow the many conversations that Greta Thunberg is having. It's called the Greta effect, according to many of these parents. They're doing all kinds of other things, too, as far as the way in which they censor digital devices, or the way in which they talk about things like climate change. They're shifting their focuses based on what their kids believe. So this study is demonstrating that the power dynamic is at an all-time low. And I imagine this might not be everyone. I imagine that when you pick 2,000 random parents, that you might not be getting the absolute, perfect assessment of people. But I do wonder how many parents are swaying some sort of belief in order to appease a child. Because in this day and age, apparently, doing things to better raise children might be challenging. There might be some sort of issue with, being firm on anything. And actually, we'll get to that, too, because Mike Huckabee said something really interesting, something that when he was asked about the violence going on, actually, maybe we can try to get to it now. I don't know if that piece is ready, but it's number 10 for my producer, Phil. But Mike Huckabee was talking about violence in general, gun violence specifically. He was asked a question, and his answer had a lot to do with the current education of our children.
Well, I think it is we stop the blame game, because you have people saying, oh, we just get rid of the guns, we'd be fine. Well, it was a machete used in the Hanukkah shooting, and if it was a gun that stopped the what would have been a horrifically worse murder situation in the church. So it's not the weapons of choice, it's the lack of heart, it's the lack of focus in human beings. And when we have an education system that from the time these kids are tots tells them that there's nothing that is really right nor wrong, it's whatever they think it is, whatever they feel it is, whatever they believe it is, and that results in an adult becoming where they also think that they don't have to tune their lives. Real quickly, let me just mention, as a musician, I know this, that before you play a song, you got to tune your instrument. What do you tune it to? Do you tune it to what you think? No, you tune it to a standard. We are a culture and society that is not tuning to any standard other than what we want. We're selfish. We've sat around and we've created this culture in which it's all about me. And that is a dangerous place for us to continue going.
Yes. I'll stand up and applaud Mr. Huckabee. At times, I'm not sure that I love everything that man says, but this, I have no problem with this. And my producer, actually, Phil, very smartly said that it doesn't even start in the classroom. It's not even the education of children in school. It's at home. And then I find a story today about how child power is on the rise. That's a literal quote from the people who did this survey, who did this study, that we've had girl power in the past. Now it's time for child power. Where are we at? I don't know if I'm going to do the whole show like this. I've got to find some funnier things to lighten my own personal mood, hopefully lighten your mood as well. But right now, oh my gosh, the year only has 2 days left. At least that's good. A quick break. I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about how long you stay in a relationship when you're sure you're going to break up with someone. I saw a recent conversation that it might be a lot longer than you think. More Chad Benson Show with Craig Collins filling in after this.
Check out our Chad Benson Show Facebook page where you can hang out or hang your grievances out to dry. This is Chad Benson.
This is Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show, hanging out with you today and tomorrow. Chad will be back after the holidays. I have a story in front of me. A study of 2,000 people was conducted, and they asked you how long you stay in a relationship when you know it's over, when you know you're done, you're ready to break up. They didn't necessarily make it specific to married or dating, and they didn't ask people if they had kids, which I imagine all those things changed the dynamics of this study profoundly. But they just asked if you're in a relationship, if you have a significant other of any kind, how long after you're sure you're done do you wait? And I thought the answer was kind of surprising, even though it doesn't sound that long compared to some of your friends who might be in, like I said, more complicated situations, marriage, children, what have you. But at least 2 months is the answer given by more than 50% of the respondents, meaning that even in a dating relationship, even in a situation where there's nothing tying you two together other than the fact that you said you're going out, you wait 2 months after you've decided to end things to actually end things. Is that a byproduct of the fact that we're all, social media, cell phone using humans now who don't have direct face-to-face conversations? Or is that how it's always been? I can't recall a time, and maybe this just means that I'm the jerk. I'm the one bad apple in this whole survey, but I can't recall a time where I waited that long to break up with someone. I'm married now, happily married, mind you, for anyone wondering. So there's no pending situation going on in my brain. But if you were, in a situation, especially a dating one, I get it if you're married and you have kids, that there's a lot of other things going on, a lot of things to talk about and consider. But if you're just a young person in a relationship right now, if you're listening to this show right now, this is the weirdest thing I've ever encouraged on a radio program I've hosted. But if you're listening right now and you're sure you're done with your significant other, I want you to break up with them and then call us. I want you to tell us you did it and not be mean. I don't want you to criticize the other person. I just want to help one millennial get over that hump today. Specifically a millennial would be great. If you've been sitting on something for multiple months and you're like, you know what, this Craig guy, he's making some sense on the radio. I need to call Sharon and break things off. Then do it. Do it and let us know. It would be great to hear from you. The managing director of one of the groups that did this study said that plenty of us have delayed a breakup because of different celebrations coming up, whether that be Christmas, New Year's Eve. And I do understand that. You hear during the holiday times that you hang on to somebody because you don't want to go to the family alone. You don't want to be there when grandma or whoever's going to ask you why there's no kids yet, whatever's going on, why there's, no one special in your life. But really, in that situation, I think you should probably just bring a friend. I don't think you should stay in a relationship and avoid those conversations that way and then make everyone upset when it's over. I'm an Italian. I don't know if I've mentioned that before in the show, and my grandmother is very Italian. And anyone that doesn't know, anyone that's not in the club, even if I went to a party and introduced her to a lovely lady, which again, I'm married. I'm just using this as, I say all that for my wife more than the other listeners. But if I did all that and then broke up with her, guess what? Grandma's going to find out, and she's going to be just as upset because she just met that lovely woman at Christmas or wherever she met her. So there's not going to be a time where you avoid for real. So just pull the plug, do what you need to do. Cut them loose. And I would love to hear someone call in today and tell me that my show helped you out, helped you get across the line. I don't want the ex to call in and blame me for the reason you guys broke up, although you can. I'll apologize to you if that happens to you because of the show today, but let me know. Moving on to one other thing, and then I know I got a break coming up real quick, so maybe I can't even tell you the whole story here. Maybe I'll just have to do a little tease and then get you back in a minute. There's insurance claims that are skyrocketing. I think this is mostly in the UK for now. I don't think this is the kind of thing that's affecting us, which is great because America needs no more insurance-related medical issues. But apparently, the amount of claims in pet insurance world for things like anxiety, depression, and OCD are at an all-time high. People in the UK are very worried about the mental stability of their pets. And I don't want to sound like I'm insensitive to the pets. I love pets. I've had dogs and cats all my life. I'm a big fan. But I can't see myself spending thousands of dollars to treat a pet that's not doing anything, to harm themselves because they're sad or they might have OCD tendencies. I just can't see myself doing it. You live your life. It's 2019. You live you, whatever way you need to be. But if it were me, if I were living over there, or if, say, I even had someone in my life who wanted us to throw money at a problem like this, I'd probably say, maybe just take the dog out and play a little more fetch. Maybe we don't need to put medicine in his kibble. Maybe the best solution is truthfully just to make sure that, I've got a tennis ball ready. All right, Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson. I hope I didn't end too many relationships just now. Give us a call if I did, though. I'm intrigued. A lot more coming up later on, but right now, a quick break.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show with you today. I am also back with you guys tomorrow, actually, and then Chad's back after the holidays. But this is the Chad Benson Show. Don't change your dial. Mike Pompeo did an interview, I believe it was this morning, and he was asked a couple different times if he would ever run for a Senate seat, and he had some interesting answers to that conversation. But here we go. We have Rachel Compost Duffy and Pete Hegseth asking Mike what he thinks about a Senate run.
You're beloved in your home state of Kansas. There's a lot of people that want you to run for Senate. So are you going to?
So Susan and I love Kansas, too. It's home. It's where our family, it's where our friends are. You know, Rachel, coming from the great state that you and your husband both love. But it's my intention to stay here and continue to serve as President Trump's Secretary of State. I've said that consistently. I intend to keep saying it. And as long as President Trump wants me to serve in this capacity, there's still work to do.
Right. So I've got to push just a little bit. So you intend, Mr. Secretary, does that mean you write off completely the idea of going back to Kansas in 2020 to run?
I've watched my life take turns that one would never have expected. But it's not something I want to do. I want to stay here and continue to perform the mission that I'm serving President Trump, and I hope doing a good turn for the American people as well.
It's interesting to hear him talk about that, though, and then actually the host went on to say that it might be a step back to go from his current role to become a senator. But I do wonder sometimes if maybe people like him are people that we need to start, considering those things more heavily. It's interesting to hear them discuss it at such great length, because I'm not sure I hate the idea. I think that Mike Pompeo is well-liked for sure in his own home state. So, if the race is something that we're worried about in any way, shape, or form, if any one side would like to make sure that you win certain things, very popular people should consider their runs. And it's interesting the way they also tease that maybe right now your answer is different than it's going to be a little bit later on. I love the way that politics work in that sense, that at any one time you can be 100% sure of something, and then 2 months later, the exact opposite winds up being true. But I don't expect him to run, so I believe in the answers that he's giving there. One other thing that I thought was interesting that I noticed happened again over the weekend. It's been happening a lot. This is the kind of thing that seems like a hot trend if you're a Democrat running for president and you are asked a question like, hey, who would you nominate for a Supreme Court position if one were to open up during your administration? And Joe Biden, just like many another Democrat has said, Barack Obama would be their top choice. That is correct. Former President Barack Obama, if given a chance, and I think the way Biden said it is, I'd only do it if I knew he was going to take it, and I doubt he'd have any interest. And I should mention that, the Obamas have a pretty sweet deal with Netflix. So I don't know if they'd have interest in going back into that political world, although they do still live in D.C. While doing their Netflix things, whatever they are. But what an odd... Do we now, in today's day and age, just try to say Obama's name whenever we can if we're on a certain side of the aisle? Is that the kind of thing, just any question? Would you just... The answer is Obama first, Barack Obama first? I wonder how crazy it would get. What is your religion of choice? Well, I would worship Obama if he were a religion, but since he's not, I guess I'm going to go with Christianity. Is that how this works? When have we ever discussed something like this before? For whatever reason, it's just the kind of thing. And then I do hear this from time to time, too, that Michelle Obama would be the best possible choice to run against Trump. Not any of the candidates currently running. They all don't seem to be grabbing us, by the shoestrings enough. But let's get another Obama in there. Let's get Michelle to take a crack at it. No knock against Michelle Obama. I'm not going to say anything disparaging against her. I don't want the whole show to get in trouble for what I say. It's just such an interesting idea that the only people that really deserve to run have to have a last name of Obama and or Clinton. And by the way, I know that Hillary is, not necessarily running, but I know she wants to. I know she wants in, so I'm just waiting for that to happen. I'm waiting for us to get to a point where we start discussing that, because I still feel like it's not over till it's over as far as she's concerned. I want to move on to something a little sillier I saw recently. Columbus Blue Jackets head coach, that's John Tortorella, was very, very upset at something that happened in a hockey game. I know you might not watch hockey, but just hearing a coach be this mad, and this clip is edited, but this was his press conference he gave. He was asked about some referee decisions that were made, and this was his reaction.
So instead of resetting the clock, we have them tell our captain we're not going to do it. Toronto doesn't step in. Refs don't do their freaking job. And now we lose the game, and we lose our goalie. So the chain of events, if it was done right, we don't lose our goalie, we win the hockey game. So all this technology, right? The technology and getting things right, the stubbornness tonight by the officials and by the league and Toronto, however it's supposed to work, screws us. It's ridiculous. I'm not taking any...
And he walked off. He's not taking any questions, and he just left. And do you know why I find this so amusing? The reason I find this so amusing is not that I'm necessarily a huge hockey fan, but that he's so mad at technology. Because we've all seen this anger before. You've seen it in a family member. You've seen it in someone who can't get like a universal TV remote to work. They get so mad. Or someone who doesn't know how to use their cell phone correctly. And maybe that's even been me from time to time. I will admit that here on the show, that every once in a while maybe I'm the victim that goes this road. But the fact that he's so mad at technology today, that sports have instant replay and they have so many ways to avoid bad decisions. And so he goes to his press conference still mad. He's been mad for now hours, I assume, and he can't even talk about it. He just keeps stopping himself. He curses when he knows he shouldn't. He goes rogue. And this reminded me, actually, of something else I remembered from John Tortorella, something that was interesting to me. He was a coach of a different team back then, but in 2014, he full-on tried to go to an opposing team's locker room to fight people, and I have that audio.
John Tortorella has gone over to the Calgary Flames hallway outside their room. That's the Canucks coach outside the Calgary room. There's Brian McGrattan trying to push him aside with some of the Calgary staff.
Okay, he's got to calm down.
Yep.
No. Maybe that's directed at me, too. I also need to calm down. But no crap, that makes sense that you would say that. This guy is living at a 10. His whole life he lives at a 10. And maybe today on this show, for whatever reason, with the stories I found, I'm living a John Tortorella lifestyle. But man, oh man, I can't envision being so mad I'd want to fight an entire hockey team. As just one guy. No one's supporting him. He's not doing this in a group. He's not bringing a bunch of his player buddies with him. He's going rogue, and he's going to fight the team alone. Cheers to you, man. In this day and age, this is the right way to end 2019, with a hockey coach so upset with technology that he acts sort of like my grandfather whenever he has to talk about it. Real quick, one other thing that I want to mention, and then I got to take a break. And I found this as fascinating as everything else I found fascinating today. There is a new invention that is designed 100%. I think it's out of Beijing. I think the University of Southern California, though, was involved in helping create it. but it's designed for when we have Armageddon, when we've hit the climate change apocalypse that we all know is coming. When that finally happens, there is a solution. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. If food is something that's hard to come by, this group of people has invented a vest that you can grow plants on. You can grow plants directly on yourself. You'll have 22 to 28 different spaces to grow food that you would then consume off of your jacket that you'd wear throughout the day, because obviously it's valuable to have the soil and the sunlight, everything on you, because it can't go anywhere else. We can't trust it anywhere else in the world. The craziest part about it, though, and the article I read was so proud of the invention itself, but the craziest part about it is what it needs in order to grow, any sort of food. It's not just water. They need something a little bit different, something that you and I, have to go to the restroom to create, and you wear that on yourself. That's the idea from the University of Southern California, that if you need to water this thing the other way, that'll be fine. We'll all just get used to it when the climate has destroyed everything. We'll all just walk around with vests of food and byproduct. All right. I don't know if I'm back tomorrow now. The topics today, I apologize if anyone's offended. I just couldn't handle that story either. Maybe I'll take a break. I'm going to take a breather. I'm going to give myself 5 minutes and breathe into a paper bag. A lot more Chad Benson Show coming up with your fill-in host and very excited human, Craig Collins.
Being antisocial sucks. Hang with Chad's friends on Facebook, The Chad Benson Show. And if you just need some alone time, head on over to Twitter at Chad Benson Show. Either way, we can't wait to meet the real you.
Craig Collins filling in on The Chad Benson Show. Chad will be back after the holidays. I'm back with you guys tomorrow. So if you enjoyed my very animated, very angry couple hours, I feel like I'm the guy from a network, Howard Beale. I'm just going to start yelling, I'm mad as hell, and I can't take it anymore during these segments. But I have a story about aliens, if that interests anyone out there, if it interests the aliens out there. And there's a lot of stories recently that I've seen that cover some sort of idea that we're not alone and that we'll find that out very soon. And actually, executive director of the Paradigm Research Group, that is Stephen Bassett, says that we're going to find out in 2020 that we are not alone. He believes that the government is keeping aliens a secret from us, that we all know what exists, what's real. We've known for quite some time. But finally, in 2020, they're going to let us in on the dirty secret that there are other beings around. And this actually connects to a story I saw recently about technology and communication. And it's interesting that they connect like this, but hear me out for a second. Apparently, the way in which we communicate and our technology and how far, how long we can project certain things is getting way better. We might be able to have in real-time conversations with people very, very far away from us. I'm talking about out there in the stratosphere away from us. And if that technology becomes available, what fascinated me the most is how it connects to the idea that there is some other planet somewhere that has beings on it. Because what if, you've seen it in the movies, you've seen it everywhere. They invade us, we invade them. Somehow the connection is made physically. But what if, to be very fair to 2019, all we could do was talk, or maybe even just FaceTime/Facebook each other? Maybe there's nothing better than the fact that we will at some point be like, hey, we know you're out there and we're here, but we can't get to you and you can't get to us. And that's the entirety of the situation. If Stephen's correct and it exists, we've found places where there is other life, and then we have the technology to say hi to them. Wouldn't that be a weird version of knowing that aliens are out there? That there's like some phone sitting somewhere where you can just have a conversation, provided they know what the hell we're saying, provided they speak the same language. But that's it. We don't actually, evolve transportation, where we can go far enough to actually go visit anybody. We can just talk to them. Just figure out what's going on and be like, well, that was cool. Nice talk. It's like talking to your grandmother. You get to know what's going on in the world, and then you're done. But, activist of the Paradigm Research Group, Stephen Bassett, who's also the executive director, is for sure aware of aliens, and he knows we're all going to find out in 2020. I wonder if you agree. I wonder if you think, one, that they exist. I do actually think that it makes sense somewhere. I don't think relatively close to us. I think it's outside of our solar system that there's probably other planets that have other people. And it would be cool if they're the same, if we're just totally the same. If you call up and there's some guy who's president over there who's called Ronald Trump, and he's, essentially the same dude. It would be awesome to think that that's where we are in society. One other quick thing. I know I got to take a break here in just a second, but I found this fascinating, that foldable phones were a big deal in the technology sector. People were very excited, at least people who create these things, that we could have a smartphone like the one you're probably holding in your hand or in your pocket that could fold its display, and you could have twice the phone for, half the price or whatever it would be. But apparently the users, the people in the real world, aren't terribly interested in foldable phones just yet. That's not the thing we want. And I don't know how you could have figured that out if you're a technology person, other than the fact that they existed already, other than the fact that I know it wasn't a smart screen you were folding, but I had a Motorola Razr, which is a phone that's coming back, by the way. But yeah, this is a big story today that the tech world has been shocked by a lack of interest in foldable cell phone technology. Do you want one? Is that something that you're interested in? Because right now, I find this to be true all the time. I have a iPhone 8. I haven't upgraded since then, or it's an 8 Plus, I think. And it's relatively big. And I've had it for quite some time. And I wind up taking it out of my pocket all the time and putting it down. If you folded that into a sandwich and I had twice the phone, I think I'd eventually just give up on all of it. Again, Howard Beale, mad as hell today. I'm not surprised at all that people aren't into the foldable phone, but for whatever reason, the tech world is. Something I saw in the New York Post, and this interested me because of the way in which the question was asked. I don't think often Chad or I or anyone will talk to you about, blogs where people write in asking for help with things, advice columns, but this interested me. Someone wrote the New York Post saying that they royally screwed up at their holiday party. They got overserved, which is everybody's fear. If you work anywhere and they have a holiday party, I know that we all can control ourselves, so it's never a fear that I've had to realize, but it's always a concern. But this person wrote, how do you recover from a holiday party faux pas? The company bash is a complete blur to me. I remember none of it. But apparently, all of my colleagues do. Now my boss and all my coworkers are treating me very differently. Should I let this all blow over or what? What would be your advice? Say it to me. I can't hear you. You can call me, I guess, and then you can tell me what your advice to a colleague would be who royally screwed up. 844-DIG-CHAD. But if you don't want to give me a call, I'm just going to assume you said what they said in the New York Post. You told them the same thing that anyone should say. First, find out what happened. If you have no idea what happened, find out how you screwed up, because it's going to be very important to make sure that you make amends based on what you actually did. I can't envision waking up from a holiday party and having no idea what happened. That is scary in and of itself. But once you find out what you did, say sorry and take the blame. Accept full responsibility for the fact that drunk you is a terrible person, and the drunk you probably should not have made an appearance at said holiday party. That's the first step in acknowledging the fact that, you know what, next year I'm going to do something way different. I actually had a colleague tell me this too. They think that you should invite everyone out to another bar and not get drunk this time. And just real quick, envision that solution. If your coworker went nuts at a party and then invited you to a bar the next day, what would you say? All right, Chad Benson Show, Craig Collins filling in. A lot more coming up.
Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson on the Chad Benson Show today. I will actually be back with you tomorrow as well. Chad will be back after the holidays. You can call us 844-DIG-CHAD. I've been imploring people to call for all kinds of reasons today, including if you broke up with someone that you'd been delaying the breakup for. So I apologize for sounding like, a rock jock on a morning show, some sort of like rock music. But, hey, if it happened and you want to call, still give me a call. I'll talk about that. I have a couple things that I should hit, though, today. The first is, of course, Nancy Pelosi. She continues to hang on to things that maybe people thought she should have handed over by now. The articles of impeachment are her friend. She doesn't want to give them up. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise had comments on this today.
It's our duty to turn it over. It's not like some mechanism she can control. The House passed it. They shouldn't have. I mean, you look at what the evidence was, and Speaker Pelosi wanted to talk about the evidence. Every one of their witnesses testified under oath saying there was no crime, saying there was no quid pro quo. Maybe she's trying to carry out her own quid pro quo by acting as if she's got some kind of role in the Senate trial. They had a weak case. I think she knows they had a weak case. There was no evidence and no crime committed. And yet they still wanted to impeach the president to appease their radical base. That's what this was about from the beginning. They've neglected a real agenda for hardworking families, by the way. And so what you're seeing right now is, I think, Pelosi just exposing the fact she has no case and trying to have one more bite at the apple. They're even talking about more impeachments next year. How about they focus on lowering drug prices, securing our border, doing an infrastructure package that they could have done in a bipartisan way. They don't want to do any of that because they've become the party of impeachment. They have this obsession, it seems like, with carrying out this political vendetta that they have against the president instead of working with him to get things done.
What's really interesting about that comment is the whole talking about more impeachments taking place, more accusations against the president specifically, more articles maybe being found or, however the process is going to continue to go and just stretch on forever the way that it seems to be intent to do. And it is surreal. And I do agree with Steve that this is becoming in and of itself the story. And look, if you want to look yourself in the face and say that you're doing this for the greater good because you have a problem with the way in which certain things were handled, that's fine. But what takes away from that idea, what takes away from that narrative is that this is like try number 6 to go down this road. And now once you finally went down it and the entire time you were telling us that it had to be done quickly, it had to be done if we had to keep moving, time was of the essence. Now all of a sudden you're just sitting on it. Now Nancy is holding the articles of impeachment to make sure the next part of the process is fair, and she's not turning them over till she's satisfied with whatever the plan is moving forward. And there is a lot of debate as to whether or not she can even continue to do this constitutionally. There's a lot of confusion as to what is right and wrong and how long this sort of process can take compared to what should have probably happened by now. But if you're already discussing the fact that, you know what, these two didn't work, we're going to go and find more, we're going to find other issues, bombshell reporting, you watch certain news organizations and everything is breaking news, we get to a point where you can't work together. Obviously, we're probably already there. To anyone that just heard me say that sentence, you're like, wow, real insight today, Mr. Craig Collins. But truthfully, we're just escalating. We're making things worse and worse. If you start impeaching people for what seem to be, certainly maybe things I would have done differently if given the opportunity, but not necessarily things that are crimes and misdemeanors, not things that I would be imprisoned for or anything else, just things that the way in which they were handled would be handled differently by a career politician. And that is the reason why so many people supported this president during his campaign, by the way. For anyone that says, I'm too much of a Trump lover, I'm not per se a Trump lover. That's not where I land politically. But at the same time, I think I get the reason why you'd want someone on the outside, someone who you feel like might be cleaning the swamp a lot more than anyone else would be willing to do it. That is the reason people like this guy, that he'll get on the phone with the Ukraine, tell them that they're very corrupt, very bluntly, and ask them to investigate things because, come on, you got to investigate things for us to have a good relationship here. For that sort of thing to take place is in line with the guy that so many people wanted that seems to have been effective in quite a few other things. We look at trade deals. We look at the economy. It seems like a guy who's willing to play the game different has succeeded in a lot of places, and yet this is the world we're in. We're in a world where impeachment is the main topic of conversation at all times. And also, what's fascinating about this as we do this is Joe Biden. He's the kind of guy that I'd like to hear a little bit more from. He's the kind of human being where I don't know that I totally understand all the Hunter stuff. I believe there might be some taxes that are unpaid. I believe there's a whole lot of money that might have been made, and I'm not necessarily sure I understand all the steps here. And Joe over the weekend says, if I were subpoenaed, I'd pretty much say, no way, I'm not coming. And then when he sees the reaction to that is bad on his own side of the aisle, he goes, okay, you know what? I would go. I would talk about it. I would love to see that. That's the kind of thing I'd love to see. And I don't think that the articles of impeachment are being held back until Joe were willing to go ahead and testify. But, Nancy, maybe we play both sides of this thing. Maybe we get more information from everyone involved. And that is the thing. I actually was watching CNN, of all places. And I know, I apologize. I watch all channels because I want every take I can get. But Anna Navarro had a similar take about Joe maybe needing to make sure his talking points were aligned before this continues.
This is going to continue coming up for Biden. There is no, there's absolutely no shot that either in the primary or much less in a general, should he make it, this will not come up. And he needs to have tight, consistent answers that are logical, not defensive, not emotional. This is going to continue coming up. He needs to know how to deal with it because it's not going away.
I love the idea that if you were prepping Joe Biden, if Anna got that gig, she would have to tell him to make sure his answers were logical. Make sure it's not a rambling, nonsensical answer, Joe. Make sure that you don't dovetail into something completely idiotic. Stay on point, please, and give us real, actual facts to help us understand what happened. That is CNN's coverage of this conversation. And I think she said, if anyone accuses me of being unfair, I think she said several times that she doesn't believe anything illegal happened. But at the same time, she'd just like to know, with a little more information, a little better clarity, what Joe's explanation for all of it is. And this is silly. This should be the kind of thing that I don't even talk about, and yet I'm tempted to just mention it quickly. It's actually pretty similar to the whole thing about Trump getting cut out of Home Alone in Canada. I don't know if anyone saw that, but the president's cameo in the Canadian replaying on some TV channel of Home Alone 2, it did not have his cameo in it, and people were upset by that. I think we've since learned that maybe they've aired the content that way since 2014. But these little silly passive-aggressive things can at least be entertaining. The Bidens, they took their Christmas photo. Guess who wasn't in it? Guess what people did not appear in the Christmas photo of the one Joe Biden and family? That would be Hunter and his wife. They were mysteriously missing. And for whatever reason, social media and myself found that just very, very fascinating, very, very interesting. Switching gears entirely, I'm going to get off the impeachment stuff and the Biden stuff because you're probably sick of hearing about that like I am and just waiting for it all to be over whenever Nancy decides to be, done holding on to stuff. But this was interesting to me, and only interesting because, and I will admit this to the audience, for anyone that judges me, that's fine. I own an e-scooter. I own one. My brother actually works for a company that makes them, so I got a pretty good deal on it. But I have one for anyone that thinks that they're lame or stupid or taking over, and they are. They literally are everywhere, depending where you live. The rentable ones are just, dominating to an extent that they probably shouldn't. But I found this story, and because from time to time I've been an e-scooter defender, I wanted to share it. There was a guy out of Germany. He's 27 years old. He had a little bit too much to drink out at a party. He's in the city of Cologne there, and he decided, it's not okay to drive a car in this condition, but this e-scooter's rentable. This e-scooter's a thing that's okay. I can only go like 15 on this guy, so let me grab this. And he wound up being apprehended on the Autobahn. He was going 12 miles an hour and weaving through traffic as people are zipping by him at, 85. And he, had to apologize to the police officers. And he had to mention to them, hey, I was just trying to be safe in all this here. I found the e-scooter by the bar, and I thought this is what it's for. And no, as an e-scooter defender, I have to admonish the people who make a bad name for the rest of us. The next time that someone's on the highway on an e-scooter, you have my permission to roll down the window and scream at them. You can't do anything worse, but tell them they're a complete moron because they're making a bad name for the rest of us. Come on, guys. Please help me out a little bit so next time I roll up on my e-scooter at my radio station, I don't get just ripped apart for it. Although, honestly, I'm probably going to be ripped apart for it. Did I drive one today? No. For anyone wondering, I have an actual car today. But that doesn't mean tomorrow's going to be different. All right, quick break. A lot more coming up on The Chad Benson Show. Fill-in host Craig Collins here, an e-scooter enthusiast.
Give me a bowl of chili with plenty of peppers.
One Mexican heartburn. Why don't you mugs grow up?
The Chad Benson Show, where independent, a la carte thinkers have a seat at the table and a voice in the dialogue.
I'll have what she's having.
This is Chad Benson.
Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show. I am with you guys for the rest of the day today, and then I'm actually back tomorrow. So Chad Benson will be back after the holidays. I got a text from my little brother that I just have to talk about on the air. And it just happened during the commercial break, too, by the way. So this is breaking news. I need a CNN banner. Breaking news happening on the Chad Benson Show. My mother lives very close to my brother and not at all close to me. And every year for Christmas, she usually just gets us very simple, usually there's a check in the card, maybe a gift card of some kind, but usually there's not a lot of items. And this year, I guess she was feeling more interested in buying me actual things, in buying my brother actual things for Christmas. I wasn't capable of visiting them over the holiday season, so the items got dropped off at my brother's, like I said. And what did my brother do with my Christmas gifts? He immediately opened them all and then sent me this picture that I have, asking me which ones I want. Which ones of the items do I actually want sent my direction? And so because it's just such a hilarious message, I do want to tell you what the picture has and then what the actual, message from my brother said. He goes, simple question here. Which of these items do you actually want? Obviously, you want this, this, and this, and those are the small gift card items. There actually is a paper check, too. Thanks, Ma. And actually some stuff that my wife had left at his house back in the day, a pair of keys that he's sending. But he goes, do you really want these things, ? K-cup with Girl Scout cookie or Girl Scout cookie coffee. Do you need that item? I guess I have Ghirardelli chocolates in the list of things that Ma got me. Alcoholic eggnog, as my brother refers to it. Evan Williams. I don't know if that brand is fancy. I'm guessing it is. It is not. Body lotion, gel, and mist. And then I zoom in. And by the way, these gifts are also for my wife. For anyone wondering why Mom would go rogue and buy me body lotion, gel, and mist, those are probably for my wife. Those are probably not mine. But they are super smooth. Oh, my gosh. She's a butter coconut oil is the name of the product there. 1,000 cherries is the name of one of the other mist things. And then the last item, by the way, on the list, which is actually very interesting to me, outside of the fact that my mom bought me a $100 Prime Amazon video gift card, I hope that's not specific to just movies on Amazon. I think my mother thought she was buying me an Amazon gift card, but she might have made a mistake there. I might only be able to rent digital things with that, Mom. The last thing she sent, though, is a giant, and I mean giant, drone. This is a drone with a camera on it. It's a sharper image one. It just looks huge, which is probably why Mom chose not to send it to me, but drop it off at my brother's to make sure that, he has to pay the shipping on something like this. But I just texted back, and I go, look, this is what I said to everyone on the chain, which my wife is involved. And she said that what they were going to send is fine. It would have excluded most of those items and just been the checks and things. But I said, look, there's an obvious item here that we all know I want. We all know that, this item is the hardest one to send. And if you send this item, you might as well send all the items. But I can't help the fact, and I know you already know this, I do want this. And my brother's wife, who apparently is also on this chat, just texted me back, the drone? Yes, it's the drone. Yes, okay, fine. There's a drone with cameras on it and things. Yes, I want that. And you can obviously just stick all the items in that box because it's gigantic. But I can't help myself. And we all should blame my mother. This shouldn't be the kind of thing where we blame me for wanting it, guys. But we should blame Mom. She dropped a drone off to you, and we all know that Craig is going to secretly kind of really want to fly that thing. I'm sorry, I do. I don't know. If you're the kind of person who hates drones, I apologize for this whole segment, but it's sitting me right. It's sitting there staring me right in the face, and I can't help but want it. I should mention this now, and I might mention it again at some other point, maybe when I do the show tomorrow or whenever. But this fascinated me. There was an interview that Pete Buttigieg gave. I think he was talking to the Des Moines Register, and they asked him about, and I know, severe change in topic here from my mom sending me a drone to this topic, and I promise there's no drugs in Mom's gift because this is a drug-related topic. But they asked Pete Buttigieg what he thinks should be illegal, what he thinks people should be incarcerated for, more specifically, what drugs are good or bad according to him. And if you don't know who Pete Buttigieg is, awesome. That's great. But if you do know who he is, the mayor of South Bend who's trying to get the Democratic nominee for the president of the United States, his response to which drugs we should be incarcerated for having was none of them. He actually said none. He said incarceration should not even be a response to drug possession. That is a direct quote from Mr. Buttigieg. When he was pressed further and the interviewer asked, like, are you saying, like, all things, meth, coke, ecstasy, none of that stuff? He said decriminalizing is not necessarily what he was saying, and I'm paraphrasing that part, but he did say that's right when asked if incarceration should be off the table. And I don't know how you feel about that. My feeling is that this is nuts. This is actually a South Park episode. There is a premise similar to this idea on an episode of a show that is known for being one of the most sarcastic, one of the most humor-based shows, cartoon shows that exist in the world. And apparently Pete Buttigieg is in line with that way of thinking, that at least as far as incarceration goes, it's fine. What'd you have on you? Was a little bit of meth, some heroin, maybe some coke? That'll be fine. Just go ahead. Keep living your life. We don't need to punish you at all for having those things. It's not your fault. It's my fault. Man, I can't believe that take. There's some things that I can't get over in this day and age. There's some things I've been angry the entire time I've been on the radio today. It's just the kind of thing that happens every once in a while. You wake up a day before New Year's Eve and you can't help but be riled. You can't help but be riled at almost anything you see. And you just really want a drone that I very much doubt my brother's sending me. I wonder what it weighs. It's a sharper image drone, people. This has got to be a lighter option. This has got to be a lighter item. Real quick, before I have to end this segment, before I have to take a break, before I have to get out of here, before a whole bunch of things happen, I just want to say one more thing about, some other studies, some other interesting stories I've seen out there in the world. A new study is saying that smart cars, which a lot of people think might be very safe, might be very easy to hack. So from the most obvious of headlines for you in 2019, Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson, electronic technology in your car where you're not driving, where the computer is driving, that might be hackable. But that's a study that we found. It had to be studied in Michigan, East Lansing, Michigan. They looked into this and they said, that plan we have where everybody has a self-Uber and no one has to drive anywhere, that might not be a good idea. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow, too, so I hope to hang out with you on New Year's Eve. Chad will be back after the holiday.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Welcome back to the Chad Benson Show. I'm fill-in host Craig Collins hanging out with you today. I will actually be back again tomorrow. And yes, I'm humble bragging about that. Chad comes back after the holidays. I want to start off this conversation by looking a little bit more at what happened, unfortunately, in Texas. There was what could have been a much worse shooting where two people were killed at a church. A man barged in with a shotgun. And then some of the people in the church they had weapons, they were volunteer security people, and they took out the bad person. They were good guys with guns that took out a bad guy with a gun, and that is a story that for whatever reason we're not covering enough today. At least in my opinion, I'm not hearing enough about it. But the AG of Texas, that's Ken Paxton, talked a little bit more about the issue and then the fact that this has devolved into a gun law debate.
It's really frustrating. I saw comments by Beto O'Rourke criticizing leadership and Julian Castro. And the reality is we already have laws against murder, and it didn't stop this guy from coming in and killing people. So people like this, if they're willing to violate murder laws, which in Texas can get you the death penalty, creating more gun laws is not going to change somebody like this. So I wish that these people would look at the facts, look at the situation, and suggest things that make sense. And neither one of these guys, while they were criticizing, offered up solutions that work.
Correct. So anyone that turns a conversation where 2 people were killed and a whole lot more were not into a conversation about how we need to restrict the use of guns, restrict the ability for people like the good people in Texas who were capable of ending the threat long before any sort of police force had to respond to the scene, long before things got much, much worse. The conversation is that something is bad, but there is no way to make it better. There's no way to fix it if you're having the conversation that we need to reduce the amount of weapons and try to find another solution, because you have to give one. That's the first part of all of this. And the thing that's most interesting about us desiring to not talk about this story more is that it seems that even though it's tragic and life was lost, that this was a much better outcome than we've seen a lot of other times in a lot of similar situations. And why was it better? Well, one, it's Texas. I mean, out of all the places that you'd go to do something like this, I would not recommend Texas. A lot of people there are capable of defending themselves, and people did. And they defended the other people that were there in the church at the time. And, you know, now the conversation becomes not what actually happened, but what we want to talk about instead. We're seeing that in quite a few different areas today. We're seeing that in quite a few different places over the last few days. Conversations that the facts will be ignored, like the tragic event that also happened in New York, where a crazy person, a person with documented mental disabilities and mental disorders and you know, has been treated for all kinds of things because he is not a sane, okay human, attacked a group of people, attacked a religious group of people that are often, you know, attacked in other things. That hate crime is certainly a word you can use in other issues that have come up where Jewish people are attacked. But in this case, that's not what happened. We seem to know the facts, at least as they are today. And if they change, then I'll be the first person to come on here and tell you I was wrong. But when the narrative is we need to stop hate crimes like this, and then the actual facts are that this guy's insane, has no connection to any sort of hate group, has no motivation that's been documented or put out there in the world to any of the people he knows or any of his social media accounts, and that he just picked a random group of people, I guess, and decided to hurt them with a machete, no less. He went in and attacked people, and it's a horrific thing that happened, but it's not motivated by what we want to talk about. So we change the conversation. Those are the things that happen. Michael Moore, for whatever reason, transitioning yet again to something that makes me clench my fists in rage, wants to have a conversation about how in his mind, all white people, or almost all white people, are terrible. And Michael Moore is a white person. Here's what he said on a podcast, by the way, that maybe he assumed no one would hear. We heard you, Michael.
I refuse to say because we elected Obama that suddenly that means everything's okay. White people have changed. White people have not changed. Two-thirds of all white guys voted for Trump. That means anytime you see 3 white guys walking at you down the street toward you, 2 of them voted for Trump. You need to move over to the other sidewalk because these are not good people that are walking towards you. You should be afraid of them.
Oh my God! I can't. There's more. I don't even want to play more. I don't want to play more. Okay. Can I just? This is the only response I have to what Michael Moore just said. To anyone that, for whatever reason, might believe any of the things that he just said, might support any of the things that he just said. Our world today, every single person isn't getting in a fight. There's horrific things that happen. Yes, stories like the 2 that I just mentioned out of Texas and out of New York, those things happen. Yes, but it's not 2/3 of white dudes that are people you need to cross the street because of. This is not an accurate representation of the current world in which we live. And if you want to have a productive version of any conversation, one where you actually go toward fixing an issue that you've correctly identified exists in any format, you can't immediately be as hyperbolic as possible. You can't immediately say that 2 out of 3 people, white guys, voted for Trump, and thus they are scary people. They are people you need to protect yourself from if you encounter them in public. That is just not an accurate portrayal of most of the people that exist in this world. Most of the people are not people you need to be terrified of for your own safety. It is a very small subset of human beings, and I don't think I'm educating most people I'm talking to right now. I just need to say it. Okay, fine. We'll play the little extra bit of the Michael Moore conversation because one of his hosts on that podcast says, well, the third guy probably voted for Trump, too.
And the third one probably says, I'm thinking about voting for Trump. Right.
Yeah, the third one is you and me.
Yeah. Right.
We're traitors. We're traitors to our race. That's how they see us, too, by the way.
Right.
You know, we were thinking, we've been debating whether or not to go to Trump's rally in Battle Creek.
Sweet, merciful heaven. If 2 out of every 3 white guys is Michael Moore, that's the only situation where I think I'm actually going to criticize things like that. That is a scary world to think that 2 out of 3 of us are literally Michael Moore. Quick break on the Chad Benson Show. I need to take a breather. I've got a paper bag here with me. I'm going to breathe into it again. A lot more coming up.
No fake outrage here, just the real thing. The Chad Benson Show.
Welcome back to the Chad Benson Show. Filling in today, your host is me, Craig Collins. I want to get to something that Mike Huckabee said that's of great interest to me because I don't know how or why I could possibly disagree with it. He was doing an interview and gave a take on the reasons for violence to exist the way it does in our current society and what he suggests as the actual fix. And take a listen as well and tell me if you have a problem with anything he says. Maybe the only issue, and my producer correctly pointed this out to me when I was talking about this audio, is that there might be other ways to solve the problem, not putting the blame on the people that Huckabee puts it on. But the simple fact that he's preaching the message he preached today is interesting enough to me.
Well, I think it is we stop the blame game because you have people saying, oh, we just get rid of the guns, we'd be fine. Well, it was a machete used in the Hanukkah shooting. And if it was a gun that stopped the what would have been a horrifically worse murder situation in the church. So it's not the weapons of choice. It's the lack of heart. It's the lack of focus in human beings. And when we have an education system that from the time these kids are taught tells them that there's nothing that is really right nor wrong. It's whatever they think it is, whatever they feel it is, whatever they believe it is, and that results in an adult becoming where they also think that they don't have to tune their lives. Real quickly, let me just mention, as a musician, I know this, that before you play a song, you got to tune your instrument. What do you tune it to? Do you tune it to what you think? No, you tune it to a standard. We are a culture and society that is not tuning to any standard other than what we want. We're selfish. We've sat around and we've created this culture in which it's all about me. And that is a dangerous place for us to continue going.
What problem do you have? Is the only problem the fact that he points a little bit too much to educators and not necessarily parents? That's the problem that my producer Phil had if he barely had one at all with that take. It's that for whatever, things we could do in school, we should be doing as many or more things at home to educate our children, to help our children understand that it's not all about them. And that I 100% agree, Mike Huckabee. I 100% agree with that entire take, the entire, concept behind it. I don't know if that is the only thing that causes people, a very small amount of people, I might say again, to be the ones to actually hurt others. I think that there's a certain level of mental, problems that come into place, of mental sickness that becomes a huge part of it. But if you're going to point the blame at the fact that so many of us today are told that no matter what we are, that's okay. No matter who we are, it's fine. That's as strong of a take as any I've heard. Quick switching gears a little bit because palate cleansers are important. It's still the holiday season. I saw this study or this conversation. I thought it was pretty interesting. It's from researchers out of Harvard, Boston College, and Boston University. They all got together. They conducted a study that looked at a bunch of different high-end consumer products or consumer things that people purchase and their reaction after they buy something, which is a perfect time for the study. If you splurged on yourself, which a lot of us do on the holiday season, once those deals pop up, there's a lot more often times that you're buying them for you than anyone else. How do you feel after you buy it? Especially the bigger end, the fancier things. If you're not the kind of person that owns a whole lot of really, really nice things, how do you feel after you pick one up? Apparently pretty bad. most people have what's called imposter syndrome. And right, it is a giant psychological rabbit hole that we all dig ourselves into, where the idea is the fact that you can't really, say that this is my typical lifestyle kind of purchase, that this is not an everyday item for me, means that you would then be sad or impacted in a negative way by the fact that you now own it. When you look at that one item in your house that's nicer than everything else you own, I guess it spirals you into a world where you're, upset about the fact that you have it. And even there, we need to figure out a way to fix this. It says in the study that even luxury apparel, items with very nice brand names to them might make you feel less happy than if you just didn't own them. Our cell phones make us feel less happy than if we didn't own them. It's crazy the way that this sort of thing works. But if you're the kind of person that made a luxury purchase, at least know that if you feel like crap, you're not alone. Another study that I found that was interesting talked about eating chili peppers and how that might extend your lifespan. 20,000 Italian citizens were studied on an average of 8 years, and they found that those who consumed more chili peppers on a regular basis were about 23%. These people were 23% less likely to be sick, to die, to have any kind of health issues than the people who didn't consume this on a regular basis. And I love these studies where it tells me there's like one magic trick to things, because I don't know, I'm going to hit a grocery store and buy a whole bunch of chili peppers. That's me. I'm going to do it for sure today. And, I don't know if it'll only last a week or two. My New Year's resolution will be to eat as many chili peppers as I can possibly consume on a daily basis, which is totally ruining the message in this study, by the way. That's not what it's telling me to do. But I'll do it, and I'll just hope for the absolute best. If it worked in Italy, it's probably going to work for me. I'll be totally fine. This is now the study segment, so I'm going to give you guys one more. 75% of adults are not friends with their neighbors. Does that surprise anyone? 75% of people out there in the world don't really give a crap who they live next to. And maybe all this is just kind of building together. Maybe there is a macro idea in all of these concepts that sounded very, very different as I was introducing them. But maybe the idea is we just need to be people again. We just need to be humans. We need to interact with other humans. We need to be tough on people when they say dumb things. We need to be nice to people who are nice to us. We just need to find a way to stop being these weird, exaggerated versions of ourselves in every which way that we can be. And being people means introducing yourself to your neighbors, not needing to find them on Facebook and like their post about the fact that they live next to you. You need to be able to walk over, knock on the door, offer them any sort of tools or butter that you have if they need it, if they need to borrow it at any point, and then say thank you so much for opening the door and saying hi to me, and I look forward to living next to you. If that's all it takes to make the world a better place, and maybe Mike Huckabee knows all of his neighbors, I think that we can handle that. I think we can find a way as a society to all get to a place where we're willing to go knock on a neighbor's door. I also do want to talk about this at some point today. It's of interest to me, but I saw a comment about how the new Star Wars movie was not effective. A lot of people didn't like it because their expectations were just way too high. And the idea that we can have, these overblown, feelings or thoughts or expectations for things that, that we're hoping to be really cool when they come out, and that alone is what ruins the experience for us, is another really intriguing concept. To think about the idea that if you just went into a movie expecting a movie and not expecting your brain to explode and your life to be different when you walk out of the theater, then maybe you wouldn't be so mad when whatever the heck happens with the Skywalkers happens with the Skywalkers. That maybe when you walk into the movie theater, whoever you are, whatever age you are, and probably I'm overly assuming it's any one group of people, but assuming that this last movie in this saga is going to just make everything different, you're going to walk out with profound realizations is part of the issue. And we do overblow this stuff like crazy. We sure do. And you know what's really scary about this study as I look at it, as I look at the people who were surveyed by Ohio State University? Apparently, having completely low expectations does us no better. We can have no extreme walking into a movie theater. They said this, the co-authors of the study, about someone who went in with the exact opposite. Obviously, if you have a high expectation of something being good, you might have unrealistic standards for it. But if you have a low expectation, it's not helpful either, because that negative, and I'm quoting the study now, that negative bias going in drags someone down, and it can even make what seemed pleasant and surprising bad, because they still just don't seem to understand that it's a movie. This is a movie. This is not anything bigger or better or worse than that. And the fact that it might not, or it might be good, doesn't mean that, like, your life is ruined. And now if I'm hating on the Star Wars haters, I should apologize to Chad Benson now, because if at some point I upset the fanboys, he's never going to get past it. We're never going to silence people. And I do like the movies. Again, I want to say that. But if it's bad, it didn't ruin your life. And if it's good, it didn't make your life better. You watched 3 hours of movie. That's all you did. Craig Collins is filling in today on the Chad Benson Show. But if you're an upset Star Wars fan now, I'm going to deny the fact that I was here. It's definitely somebody else. It's probably my producer. That was a segment completely conceived by Phil. Quick break and a lot more coming up on Chad Benson with Craig Collins filling in, or maybe Phil.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Welcome back to the Chad Benson Show. I am your host today, Craig Collins. I actually will be back tomorrow as well, celebrating the holiday with you guys. Chad will be back after that. There was some audio that I found pretty funny today, and I like it mostly because it's not politics at all. That's probably the first reason I enjoy it. The second is because it feels a lot like the way that my grandfather would react to any and all technology. A coach, a hockey coach, this is the Columbus Blue Jackets hockey coach, for anyone that doesn't follow the sport. His name is John Tortorella. You can tell that I'm a huge fan. But John Tortorella was at the podium right after a game where he very much thinks the ref screwed up. He thinks that they, could have made fixes to some of their issues and didn't do it. I guess there was a timing issue, etc. But John can take it away from here because he is angry.
So instead of resetting the clock, we have them tell our captain we're not going to do it. Toronto doesn't step in. Refs don't do their freaking job. And now we lose the game and we lose our goalie. So the chain of events, if it was done right, we don't lose our goalie, we win the hockey game. So all this technology, right? The technology and getting things right, the stubbornness tonight by the officials and by the league and Toronto, however it's supposed to work, screws us. It's ridiculous. I'm not taking any.
And he just walked off. He's not taking any questions. He's leaving. He's done. He's out. He's not coming back. Goodbye to everyone and everything. Have you ever been that mad? Is there anything that's ever made you that upset? I know that technology can be a trigger, like I said, for a lot of people. I know that when the universal remote doesn't work correctly, or when the telephone's not doing what you want it to do, that people can get this mad at technology too. I've heard many people yell, "This is supposed to make my life easier, darn it!" And for whatever reason, it's not. Actually, I don't think I've mentioned this here before, but I'm a huge fan of smart technology. It's a thing I like way too much. I like the fact that I have Alexas in my house that I know. I get this call a lot. They're spying on me. I'm aware. They know a lot of personal things that I'd prefer they don't know, that some young person that does, this sort of work for Amazon has heard conversations I didn't want him to hear. I don't care. I don't know why I don't care, but I like the fact that my lights can turn on and off just because I asked them to. I like that quite a bit. My wife, not as big of a fan. And so I've seen her have this exact argument, this exact conversation with our smart devices. She's screamed at them for not understanding her command to turn the lights on or lock the door or all the other technology things I have in the house. And so maybe for that reason it's humorous to me. And by the way, my wife is very small. She's petite, but she can throw a mean shoe. So you do not want to make her mad because she can whip those kind of things. And it may or may not happen to me from time to time. But she's never decided to try to fight other people. She's not the kind of person to do that. And the other thing that's fascinating about listening to this audio is the coach that it is, because I guess he gets mad a lot. I did a deep dive into times when John Tortorella was really angry, and I found a lot of results, and my favorite is probably from 2014 when he was so mad at an opposing hockey team that he tried to break into their locker room and fight them all.
John Tortorella has gone over to the Calgary Flames hallway outside their room. That's the Canucks coach outside the Calgary room. There's Brian McGrattan trying to push him aside with some of the Calgary staff.
Okay, he's got to calm down.
Yep.
I want to be a person who has a job like that. I want to be one of the announcers. Okay, he's got to calm down. That is a great piece of advice. He's got to chill just a little bit. What do you do when someone goes nuts? When you see someone explode in front of you, and they're not exploding at you, they're not even exploding at somebody else, because in the first of the two examples I played, people are just yelling at technology. So I'm curious, what do you do when you see someone just get super mad at an inanimate object, an object that can't really fight back? Because I try to suppress laughter. If that tells you all you need to know about me, okay, that's fine. But more often than not, if I see someone super upset, I will try to help. I'm not one of the horrible people in Seinfeld who doesn't help someone in need. I will do it. I will get up. I will figure out any technology you need me to understand for you. But I will be suppressing a whole bunch of laughter. And I imagine that's what's happening during this. If you're pulling a coach off of a door to get him to not fight an entire opposing team, you got to be laughing in the back of your mind. You got to be thinking to yourself, man, this is awesome that he's this upset, that he's this pissed at everything going on right now, because, we all need to take a breather. We all need to, you know what, I'm going to do it here on the air, because I think I need it too. Take a step back, slow it on down, and try to be calm. And what else we need to do is be respectful to other people. We don't have to let them do terrible things to us, but we have to be nice enough to them to have some amount of common courtesy. And that gets me to another piece of audio I have for you guys today. It's from Washington Post's executive editor, Marty Barron. It's number 4 on our list for my producer, Phil, to find it. And he talks about how news organizations, just maybe, and I know this is going to be shocking to everyone listening to the show, but maybe they need to do a better job at understanding, I can't even say it, that the Trump voter is a human being, that the Trump voter is a person who needs the same respect anyone else needs. They don't need what Michael Moore says they need, which is for you to cross the road when you assume they're in front of you. But let's hear what Marty had to say.
Yeah, look, I think we have to be careful. I don't want to be dismissive of people who support the president. Right. I think they're owed our respect, and they certainly have mine. But they feel that the so-called elites in Washington have not paid attention to them, that they don't understand their lives, they don't understand their concerns, that and they're not being heard. And they feel that the president is actually listening to them and addressing their concerns.
This is the kind of thing that I think we do need to take a step back and learn just a little bit better. Is that, and this is honestly true so often in life. You come across somebody who seems very nice, you talk to them just fine, and guess what doesn't come up at all? How they feel politically, or how you feel politically, because that's not really a defining characteristic of who we are as a person. I mean, in some ways, I guess it to a very small amount, matters, and I certainly would like to know where any of my friends land on the political spectrum just because I have a certain level of interest in those things, but it's not going to make me change the way I treat them. It's not going to make me need to cross the street when they're around me. So, that's a great piece of advice today, too, from Marty, is that in today's day and age, maybe, just maybe we need to assume that every single person that voted for this guy or supports this person or that person is a more complex human being. They have a lot more characteristics that you and I need to take a second and really contemplate. And I know that I'm asking a lot of us, but it's almost the end of a year. We're about to have a New Year's resolution. Almost all of us, I assume, have one. And maybe one of mine is just to treat more people with a certain level of respect and not assume, once I know something about them, like who they voted for, that now I know a lot about them. I just know very little about them at that point. Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson. Another quick break, and then I've got a lot more topics that are going to be of interest to at least me.
Don't
Don't let the Washington Beltway strangle you. This is where the exhausted majority comes to refuel, realign, and reevaluate. This is Chad Benson.
Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson on the Chad Benson Show today. And the first thing I want to talk about now is something that I just read and something that, scares me. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, this is from the AP that I'm finding this story, has called for the military and diplomats in his country to prepare unspecified, quote, offensive measures to protect the country's security. The North State media said Monday, before his end-of-the-year deadline for the Trump administration to make major concessions to salvage a fragile nuclear diplomacy. That is an article that I'm reading here right now. That is something that I'm discovering at this very moment. During a ruling Workers' Party meeting Sunday, Kim also comprehensively and additionally, he analyzed problems arising in efforts to rebuild the North's morbid economy and presented tasks for urgently correcting the grave situation of the major industrial sectors. Now, I think that a lot of this is obviously just a lot of hyperbolic speak. And it's weird that every time you land on stories like this or conversations like this, that in the back of your mind, I don't know how far back for you, but fairly far back for me, there's a scare element to all this. And I'm not intimidated by that country. I know that a fight between our country and that country would be a very big mistake for that country. I am not fearful because I think military-wise we have anything to be afraid of. But I just, as a human, don't want to see any sort of escalation, any sort of dramatic fighting take place where things like nuclear weapons are things that we have to be afraid of. And so, what's so interesting about this, and just talking for a second about the initiative and the way in which the Trump administration, compared to past administrations, tried to deal with North Korea head on and with communication. At times like these, you do have a different feeling about what could or couldn't be done to try to make things better. You know what I mean? I mean, if we're in a day and age in which another administration is unwilling to talk to them and willing to maybe not necessarily strongly threaten, but at least threaten some sort of retribution for taking any sort of military action, then there's no path forward. But if we get to a world like the one we're at now, where President Trump is willing to fly over there and have a communication with them, talk to them again, that might be a way to ease tensions. Although we have gotten to a point that, at least it seems to me, that you have to acknowledge the fact that North Korea specifically seems to have no interest in living up to any of their side of the aisle, any of their promises that they make to us. There seems to be very limited desire to make those things happen. And so I know that, this is the kind of thing that you've probably seen this news already. It's hitting me for the first time, so I'm having an instant reaction to it. But there's just got to be a way in today's society, in today's day and age, in today's world, where we can avoid any sort of need for even these types of communications, these types of conversations. And that way, to me, much like our current president, is to go and address and talk to the countries, the people who are saying things like this. And I also don't know how many points he wins, not that he needs points in his own country, for saying something like that. Is that just what his audience is craving? It's a question that I hope we never get an answer to, because I hope that de-escalation of the communication here happens almost immediately after I see the news of this. Switching gears, because otherwise I'll just cry myself into a very scared corner. I want to talk about a different study that I found. This is out of Ontario, that talks about how this is as dramatic of a shift as you can try to make in radio, and I'm going to do it. But there's a study that shows how nursery songs can help kids learn to properly clean their hands. That's right. I'm moving completely out of the realm of North Korea and fear and into how you get your kids to be cleanly this holiday season. Apparently, rhyming and rinsing is a really effective strategy to that. If you have a kid who maybe doesn't like to do all the things in the world where they need to be as clean and as healthy as possible, if they're getting sick a lot because those germs are being traded quite a bit more than they need to be, the best solution you can have is to sing them a rhyme. Sing them any kind of nursery song that also encourages them to do a behavior. And we've certainly learned this again and again, that nursery rhymes stick in kids' heads more than anything else ever. Baby Shark would be the number one thing I thought of. Not that it actually has a message that's all that helpful. I think it just says that Well, I guess it is. I'm going to defend the merits of Baby Shark. That's how I get away from thinking about North Korea. I talk about the fact that Baby Shark is all about families and love. Daddy Shark. Maybe I just play it. Maybe what I need right now is the entire Baby Shark song to get my mind to other very healthy, very happy places. Because, man, oh, man, did that article throw me off as I read that right now. But, yeah, rhyming and rinsing is a really effective strategy, if you weren't aware, for your kids this holiday season. A different conversation that I probably can have is, man, I'm so all over the place with what I just should and shouldn't talk about. I feel like we all need to just get a little distance from anything scary. And then yet I see this topic from Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, a Democrat who's trying to get the nomination for his side of the aisle. Okay, taking a big deep breath and continuing. He wants to make all drugs things that we don't put people in prison for. Any and all drugs. He was giving a interview to the Des Moines Register, and they asked him about decriminalization. They asked him about all kinds of things, and he said incarceration, and this is a quote, should not even be a response to drug possession, end quote. And then the interviewer said, because that's an interesting quote in and of itself, is that across the board? So if it's like meth or coke or ecstasy, any drug, it shouldn't be, an incarceratable thing, even if you possess it. And Buttigieg said, and I quote, that's right. So even though he's not saying that everything should be legal, that he wants to decriminalize all kinds of drugs, he certainly is willing to say that they're not crimes you should go to jail for. And I'm a little worried about that take, to be honest with you. That scares me. The idea that I literally saw this as a South Park joke. The concept that, just do the same thing you did for pot and anything else can be okay in society. We just need to accept all this stuff as not that big of a deal. Because, honestly, I do not want people that are willing to buy all kinds of drugs, all kinds of things, to not be worried about the consequences of doing those things. To not be afraid that, oh, man, there's going to be a fine I might have to pay, or, maybe my permits get removed, but that's the worst that happens to me. We need a deterrent, Pete. We need to find a way to prevent people from doing things that we very much don't want them to do. Oh, man, I'm still distracted by the North Korea thing. I'll admit it. I'm still very much thinking about the idea that what is the point in all that? Let me take a step back and think about this for a second. And I'm just going to have this brain fart on air with all of you. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm just going to spew my thoughts from my brain and hope that they make sense, or I might sound like Joe Biden. But what's the point of being so provocative in your conversation, especially if you're someone who's in control of a country like that? Because they have to know that they're not actually a threat to us. He has to be as aware of that as anybody else, Kim Jong-un. And yes, just so I recap you, I went from talking about the risk of North Korea to rhyming children and how they wash their hands to Pete Buttigieg and drugs, and then I wrapped right on back to North Korea and Kim Jong-un. But I just can't understand it. I can't fathom a world in which this is a better solution for them than anyone else, to be provocative, to say things. And you know how the president responds to this kind of stuff. He certainly is willing to say that if you make a mistake, it is the kind of mistake that you will live to regret, or maybe not live to regret, but it's the kind of thing you shouldn't do. So there will be a strong response to any idea that we are, now in a place in a world where we have to be fearful of these things. But man, I just don't understand. I don't think I ever will. And tell me if you do. You understand why provocative rhetoric is somehow valuable to countries like his. Because obviously, and maybe I'm just preaching. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir since I'm not broadcasting in North Korea. Maybe we get this show. I'm going to talk to Chad about that when he comes back from vacation. How do you feel about a couple affiliates in North Korea, bud? How does that sound to you? Okay, that sounds insane to me, too. All right, I take it back. Since I sound like I have so much fear and anxiety, I will try to transition to one other story real quick. Did you know that pets are now being treated for anxiety disorders? That's right. Pets are now being treated for OCD, depression, any sort of anxiety problems with medication. And this is happening in other countries more than in ours. But let's just let that soak in. That we're in a world today in which, if you own a pet and you're worried about his OCD tendencies, you gotta drug him up instead of just playing fetch. Fido now needs to make sure that he's got whatever he has medically so that he'll be okay, instead of just grabbing a tennis ball and doing a little bit of light exercise. Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson. The Chad Benson Show is coming back on after the holidays. He'll be back and not me. But you guys are stuck with me today and tomorrow.
This is the Chad Benson Show.